Welcome to Communications Cigars. I'm your host, John Crook. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. It is a pre-recorded episode. Not going to hide or deny that fact because it's been a little bit of a busy past weekend here. And of course, this week we have the Christmas holiday upon us. And it's just obviously going to be really busy. But the reason I wanted to also go ahead and state that I wanted to do an episode. And I had a couple of different ideas about episodes. And I guess, you know what I said? I said, let's do kind of a fun, little interesting episode where I've been getting a lot of questions from people through the different shows that we have done. And while some are minor questions, maybe asking a little bit of further explanation, like last week's episode, we talked about a little bit of like CT, CSS, or tone and signalings and everything like that. Someone said, John, I'll get these little questions from time to time. And instead of going and, answering them direct, I thought, you know what, this might be an actually cool time to do an episode to answer the questions for people directly, to say, hey, this is your question, here's the answer, but it's actually kind of a little bit of a good answer for everybody. Like many people may benefit from this, or it might actually cause some more thought or discussion. So this week's episode is entitled Listener Mail Part 1. So once again, questions have come in. We've actually been doing the show. So we started the show here, just to give you a little, I guess, background where this came from. I started the show here in September of this year, September of 2021. And I did it because of, I looked out there and I see shows about ham radio stuff. I see shows about, specific prepper stuff. I see shows about this and this and this and a lot of things related to communication. But what happens is that there wasn't really anything that I felt that was global in nature. And therefore I said, I really kind of wanted to do a show, wanted to talk. I've been on shows, whether it be by myself or through other jobs or all that kind of stuff like that. I wanted to do a show series specifically about communications in general. And that's what we do here on the show. We don't just talk about amateur. We talk about marine. We talk about aviation. We talk about CB. We talk about everything underneath the sun. So I thought, you know what? Let's get some of these questions out of there. Now, this is part 1 because I do receive a fair amount of questions that people will email me through the shows or comments that are actually posted while the show airs. So maybe that's directly either specifically through comments on YouTube or once again emails or text messages I've even received and stuff like that for people that have my number. So I said, okay, let's do it this way. So what I'm going to do today is once again, go through a little bit of each kind of show where the question kind of came from, kind of give sort of a quick recap of it, and then answer those questions that came up with it. Now, next week, part 2 is also going to be pre-recorded because of the holiday season, but that really, once again, deals with some of the same things that we have going on here today, where there's going to be more questions on there. And like I said, there's a lot that you kind of weed through and kind of look at it, and we decided to take our best selection of it. Excuse me here. So if you do have questions, if you're saying, hey, John, how did people get a hold of you? How can people get a hold of you? I have this idea, or I have this question, or I have this thought. Can you comment on it to help me out with it, or whatever the case may be? Go ahead and look at our email down here. It's communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Sorry, I can't even talk this morning. That's how you can email the show, give comments, give suggestions for the show, ask questions, however you may be, and that's really the easiest way to do it. Now, of course, once again, I am from Studio B in the basement, and in that case, in that situation, no cigars this week once again. But I do kind of tell you that I have actually picked up a few nice cigars and actually have had a few beautiful cigars that have been given to me. And I want to go ahead and thank my friend Steve. Steve works with me on the ambulance service. Steve is a big cigar aficionado on there, and Steve has actually given me a few different ones to try. He gave me a nice Gordo Fat Bottom Betty. I'm really excited to try that once the weather gets big. It's got a nice size ring on it, and in addition to the nice size ring, it also does go ahead and have the Fat Bottom Betties have just such a great flavor, in my opinion, that I really do appreciate and I really do like it. So I'm actually quite looking forward to this. I don't want to waste it too much on there, because what my concern about is that if I go ahead and while it's cold up here in northwest Wisconsin, western Wisconsin, I don't really want to waste it by just kind of freezing myself out and trying to enjoy it there. So that's the cigar part this week. So Fat Bottom Betties, I've talked about them before, and actually I'll go back, not even just the Fat Bottom Betties, but a Deadwood Tobacco Company, cigar company out of the Dakotas here in the U.S. They make some very fine cigars. They only make a couple of specific different ones. So they make a Sweet Jane, they make a Fat Bottom Betty. They do make a special edition one, which we're going to talk about next week, that I was given. So I do really appreciate that on there. I have a lot of people too, that will pop up in the chats here, comment from time to time. Let us know what your kind of favorite cigar is. I actually did some quick kind of, we'll call it research, if you want to call it that. And I stopped in at a tobacco store that was near the little strip mall that we were near for something else. And I asked them, I said, hey, I had a question, because they sold products. They sold vaping products, they sold cigarettes, they sold pipe tobacco, rolling tobacco of their own, and then they also sold cigars. I said, out of curiosity, what is the most common? Are you seeing a lot of vaping now? Are you seeing a lot of tobacco-based stuff, whether it be cigars, excuse me, cigarettes, whatever the case may be? And they went along and they said, they actually see there is vaping is a little more, but that is the big craze right now. I don't vape or anything like that. But he did say out of the actual tobacco, the biggest type of tobacco being used right now is actually cigars. And they said cigar usage has gone up. So I did a little research on there, and actually it's been a peak trend over the last, I'd say 5 years or so, where they're starting to see the increase in excuse me. In tobacco usage of leaf tobacco, let's call it, say, not like vaping or anything like that, but it has actually been cigar usage on there. So kind of, I thought, man, that's kind of a little interesting statistic on there. But let's get back to the show at hand, which, once again, is listener mail part 1. So our first question actually comes from our first show that we did, which is kind of basically asking, how did you get into like radio service, the radio hobby? How did you get into there? So the first question is that how do I obtain, or how does one go about getting a business radio license? So in that first episode, I kind of covered, kind of talked about like what got people into it, whether, usage of CB, that kind of thing like that. And then I also did state how there was usage of, business radio services. So how this question was spurred out of it. And it's actually kind of an interesting question, because I don't know or think that maybe people understand how you get a business radio license or how you can get into a radio service. So as we talked about, and for the later episodes we also talked about it also too, is that there are some radio licenses or services which are licensed by use, meaning that they're free to use. You just have to buy certified equipment. So for an example, FRS, MERS, those kind of things. No license required. Just buy the proper radio equipment and then use it on your radio service. Then you go into licenses that are actually purchased license, meaning you just pay money for it and you fill out forms or specific rules or stuff like that on there. And that would be like your GMRS. You pay for a GMRS license. You start to use the GMRS equipment, you're good to go. Business radio services, same thing. You pay for it and go. Oh, by the way, the other license by use types also too are Marine and CB. I forgot to mention those, and I do apologize. But then that's where, some people said, well, what about business licensing? Well, business licensing, it does meet some certain things. So there are criteria where you have to be in the commission of a business to get a business radio license. But it's not just something, hey, I, in general, fill out a form and then we're good to go. If you are using like the business radios, so like the pre-programmed radio or simplex channels, like you can buy VHF radios that have business frequencies in them, or you can buy UHF radios that have business frequencies in them, then yes, what you do is you go simply fill out the FCC form, pay the fee for it, and then they go ahead and do it. And they're like nationwide frequencies, those kind of things like that on there. But if you're talking about running like high power business frequencies, like 50-watt channels and stuff like that, if you're talking about mobile channels, and I'm talking like actual like business frequencies, okay, whether it be VHF, whether it be UHF, there's still some 800 stuff out there. There's 900 stuff out there. Excuse me. Gotta see, a little side note here. A little bit of reason why I've kind of been busy is because I've also had a little bit of head cold here, so I do apologize about that. But getting back to the question here, the business licenses, it basically you have to do that. So with business licenses, you can have a couple things. You can have simplex channels or radio channels, like mobile channels. Usually on the FCC license, they'll state it as MO. And then there are repeated channels that you can purchase. So basically like a repeater works, in on one frequency, out on the other. You can buy those. Sometimes they're called the different license class for the different types of repeaters, but or you can have trunked radio systems or whatever you want to basically spend your money on. The FCC will be happy to work with you on licensing. But in order to get your business license, what you need to do actually is you need to contact basically a business licensing agency, or coordination body is the better term to put it. Now, this coordination body you will write to them, and they will usually have different packages or stuff, but they will charge or assess a fee for research in your area to basically have frequencies given to you. So, for example, I have frequencies that are mine through or for business purposes. I wrote to these coordination body frequencies saying, hi, here's who I am. I would like to go ahead and I would like to purchase these business frequencies for business usage, okay, on there. And then they went along and they said, okay, they had me fill out a form. Do you want VHF? Do you want UHF? Do you want 800? What do you want? Then they asked me for some specifics, like where am I going to be using the frequency? So basically what I had to do is I had to go and had to pick a spot on a map and then give the GPS location, like putting the dot on the pin on the map in Google, right? And then the frequencies are able to be used in so much of a kilometer radius on there. Now, that could be multiple reasons what it is. So if I was to, let's say I was a handyman or a plumber or something, and I wanted just some local stuff around town. Okay, well then I would put the dot as to where the center point would be, maybe my shop, maybe my office, whatever, and I would say maybe I want 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers or any sort of distance. Now, you can't be ridiculous in your distance. What I mean by that is you can't go ahead and you can't say, okay, I want 1,000 kilometers around that point. No, that's not going to work. There are certain limitations on how far of a kilometer radius you can go around for that center pin on there. Now, once again, you need to basically use that distance or range or area like that within reason. So meaning, if you're not going to be using it in a certain area, there's no sense to go, 20 kilometers when you're only using around 10 kilometers. And that, once again, coordination body will help you figure that and estimate that and talk about that. Then they will determine what kind of radios you're using. Are you using mobile radios, or they call them mobile operations, where basically I'm using a handheld to talk to handhelds or mobiles to mobiles? Or am I going to need a repeater? And if it's a repeater, what are the specs on the repeater? Or if I'm going to have a base station, okay, like I'm going to have, let's say, my office talk on a radio to talk out to me. So there's a lot of wide different variables. Once you complete that information on there, you can go ahead and then once you look at these, send that information to coordination body. They get working on it right away. And then they'll go ahead and they'll take a look and see, okay, hey, wait a minute, we have these frequencies here and this and this and this and this. Coordination bodies, like I said, will have different packages. So it's a business service really being offered that works with the FCC on there. So my suggestion to you is to shop around with the different coordinators, as there are a few different ones that are out there. There's not just one coordinator out there. And they will offer different things. Some will offer packages of, like I said, X amount of simplex frequencies for your business in the following bands for X amount of price. Some may have repeated packages where, hey, you go ahead and purchase the repeater package and it costs this much money for a repeater pair, those kind of things like that. You pay them the money. And then once you pay them the money, they'll fill out the forms and they submit the information to the FCC on your behalf, or you can actually file the FCC forms yourself, depending on, once again, each coordinator body. And then basically you pay the fee. You're going to pay the coordination body fee. You're going to pay an FCC fee. And then once it's done, once the FCC processes it, your license is then issued to you. You'll be issued your call sign. You'll be also issued the frequencies that the coordinator body has gone and done the research on. One last thing about that is that you also will need to tell the coordination body as to what type of frequencies you need to be using. And what I mean by type is modulation type. Whether you want P25, whether you want DMR, whether you want NextN, whether you want analog, what kind of frequency you need out there. And you can also have multiple modes listed per frequency. So you can actually, as a business, get one frequency. And if you know that, hey, I'm starting off analog today, but in maybe a couple weeks or a month or a year or whatever, I'm going to be switching over to, let's say, a digital mode, you can automatically do that once again. Now, the reason I say is do that again, you're going to have to pay for recoordination. Anytime you make changes to your licensure of your frequencies, you may have to, or you could be subject to going through a recoordination. So what I tell people is, as I said, when you're thinking of your business license, try to think the term of the license. And a license term is 10 years. But try to think of that term saying, is there a possibility I'm going to go DMR? Is there a possibility I'm going to go NextN? Is there a possibility I'm going to go P25? I know businesses that use P25. My business is one of them. But that's what I'm saying is, and get that all done at one shot, because usually it's cheaper. Because each time you need to go through and make a modification license, you're going to have to pay another fee for it. And maybe that may be a fee for the coordination body, or that could actually be a fee to the FCC. So that is how do I obtain, or how does one go about getting a business license? So kind of a lot of information there, but basically to summarize, contact a frequency coordinator, talk to them, tell them what you want to do, tell them what you're looking to achieve, what you need, and they will help direct or steer you to what has to be done and the fees you have to pay them and stuff like that. And it really is an easy process. I mean, seriously, when I got business licenses, the first time I did it way back a while, many, many years ago, I was concerned and nervous, like, how am I going to have to do this or this or this or this? And no, it was pretty simple, easy, and still the process is easy. Basically, filling out paperwork and making payment. And everybody can do that, right? Alrighty, question number 2. What type of push-to-talk on cellular service are you using? It seems from your discussion and pictures that you use for business and public safety. So actually, the push-to-talk service that I actually use is actually, believe it or not, Zello. I do offer some services which it goes under Team Connect, but asking for the public safety stuff, I tend to use Zello. And the reason I tend to use Zello is because of the ability of what Zello has, the devices that it has on there, and mainly we use it from public safety is because public safety gets a discount or a special deal on there. So this came out of an episode I did, I believe it was my second episode, where we talked about Nextel and push-to-talk over cellular. So Nextel, for some that may or may not be aware of it, was basically born out of a concept or an idea of fleet radio trunking systems. So back in the day, Fleet Sync was the name of the company. And they had 800 megahertz services, and basically you bought a radio and you were on their trunking network, and then they allow you to do what they call interconnect, which would basically make you be able to use your phone or your radio as a phone. Well, Nextel came along and kind of switched it around, but they used digital technology, okay, instead of using basically analog technology. But what happened was that Nextel actually was decommissioned. It was actually bought out by Sprint, and then Sprint decommissioned it, and then Nextel went away. Now, Sprint got bought out by T-Mobile, so I think, fair justice. I really enjoyed Nextel, but Nextel was now considered a push-to-talk. Well, now that we've evolved, because when Nextel was out, we didn't have push data devices and stuff like that. We had flip phones, we had, the candy bar phones and stuff like that. But now we have a lot of data on our phones, and data is, capable of doing numerous things. You can watch videos, you can send emails, you can do all that stuff. So, basically, Zello is kind of the one that I use. And I know a lot of people use Zello also, too, in their daily lives. A lot of ham stuff, a lot of GMRS stuff on there. But basically, the reason that we went with Zello, like I said, or I use it, is because Zello has two components to it. Now, I want to state, I don't work for Zello. I don't sell Zello services. It's just answering the question on there. Zello has the free version that you can buy. Anybody, you download the app, you sign up. There's limitations on what you can and can't do. And then Zello has Zello for Work. Now, Zello for Work has two kind of tiers. You can buy and pay a monthly fee and service for users and devices and stuff, and then you can do interconnects and gateways and all that kind of stuff like that. Or you can go ahead and, if you don't want to do the Zello for Work, you want to use it for more of a public safety thing, Zello does have deals for public safety. You need to contact them from your department. They have certain requirements to validate who you are. So Zello is the one that I use. Team Connect is the other one that is a service that JJK Communications offers that I've helped with and stuff. And Team Connect is very similar, but what Team Connect does is it integrates a lot more functionality into there. So you can do forms on Team Connect. You can do, once again, the push to talk. You can do tracking. You can send messages through the system. Really, the nice part about Team Connect is that you can really just have a data plan on there, and then everything goes through the data plan. So some people I know will have a quote-unquote Team Connect device or have an old phone, like a cell phone or something that can do a data on there. And then what they do is they just put a prepaid data SIM in there, and it doesn't use a lot of data whatsoever. So they could do a prepaid SIM for like 2 gigs a month. And guess what? They can go all about and doing it. Nice thing with push to talk over cellular, PTTOC or POC, push to talk over cellular, depends on what acronym you kind of use, is that it really allows you that anywhere you have an internet connection or a data connection of some sort. So meaning if I'm in this out of my house or something, I can use the cellular network. If I'm not by a cellular network or I'm in a place that doesn't have good cellular coverage and I can have access to Wi-Fi, I can use it on a Wi-Fi. So that's the question that kind of came there is what am I using? What is our ambulance service using and stuff? And once again, we're using Zello as the primary thing on there. There are many different ones that do exist out there, but I'm going to caution people on those kind of things like that. Don't fall into this crevice of different PTT services. The reason I say that is because there are some people out there that do have other services that it can get really expensive. Like we're talking teens of dollar amounts per month on that service, and it doesn't really offer a lot of features or stuff like that on there. So I really suggest shopping around or shopping hard for a service, really depending on what you need to do. Lots of this PTT over cellular stuff has the different options and features put into it. So like they can do vehicle tracking, they can do these forms and everything like that. But the question comes down to is, really, do you need that on there? And I say, really, do you need that on there? Some people want to have the ability to communicate or talk to one another just using a device and have it quick. Now, I'll get another question. Sometimes people be like, well, then why do you have a push to talk? You have a cell phone. Why don't you send a text message? Well, it's because if I'm in a store, let's say with my wife or something like that, and I'm on one end of the store, she tells me, hey, go down to the other end and get something over there. Well, if I have a question and stuff like that, here's what I have to do. Do you want this or this item? Send. Then she has to read it. Okay, do I want this one? No, I told you. Okay, or come on, answer your phone, answer your phone, answer your phone. Okay, hey, I'm over at this end here of the store. Do you need this or this? Okay, nope. Okay, yes, you did tell me this. Where with a push-to-talk service, you basically just go and and you can key up, hey, honey, I'm over at the other end. I have a question about the item. Go ahead. Hey, what? I have 3 types of here. What do you need? And then it's that quick, instant communication. Now, is push-to-talk cellular right for every situation? No, it's not. But once again, also too, is it can go over greater lengths and it's easy to use. So that's kind of that question there for you. Alrighty. Next question we're going to go to is, this kind of came out of knowing where we had an episode where we talked about the features people look for in a scanner, in a radio, whatever the case may be. And this actually created a lot of side conversations, a lot of sidebar stuff, because people really started going and saying, hey, these are some good points on there. I don't know which one I need or whatever. And the question came is, how can I tell what features I want in a device? That's a good point. And that's a really good question, because the episode dealt with saying, okay, I want to look for a radio that has A, B, C, and D for features, and maybe X, Y, Z. But I think this question was really good because it's like, how do I know that I want A, B, C, and D? How do I know that I want X, Y, and Z? Well, the answer to the question is actually twofold. And the first part is look at the usage or what you're going to be using that device for. Alrighty. And I'll take a good example because we talked about scanners in that episode and stuff. If you want a scanner that, hey, I want to be able to receive my local police department. Well, you're going to need to know if they're 800 VHF, UHF, if they're analog or digital or some whatever, trunk versus conventional. And then once you've kind of started to lay down that feature set on there, the second part to the question is try to find a place that maybe sells the items and that you can actually get your hands on, or better yet, find out what the return policy might be for some of these places on there. And the reason I say that is I'm actually spoiled. I'm lucky. Living where I do in Wisconsin, I'm not that far from, for amateur radio stuff, Ham Radio Outlet. There used to be a place in the Twin Cities called Radio City. Unfortunately, Radio City has closed its doors years ago. This is before COVID even. They retired. Dan and Maylene, they'd been doing it for many, 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 many years. But what that it comes down to is that I actually have the ability, if the store is open and stuff like that for the showroom and stuff, going in there and playing with the devices. And that's what it's kind of nice, to get your hands on the device, to see what it is, to see, hey, I like this, or man, I could do this or this or this. Part of that also goes into, which kind of covers part one and part two, is to go online and read the manuals. Alrighty. Read the manuals for the feature set. And they usually would tell you step by step how you do this, how you do this, how you do this. And different makes and models of different radios and manufacturers are going to probably do the same thing, but it's all going to come down to the key combination or what you have to do in order to do that. So for an example, getting back, I want to buy a scanner. I want to buy one that's going to be able to cover my local police departments and stuff. So I would need one that does VHF, UHF, and 800. Reason being is a lot of stuff is VHF by me, but over in Minnesota, it's 800 megahertz. Public Works might be on UHF and stuff. I need one that's going to be conventional and trunking, but I'm also going to need a digital scanner. Now, in addition to that, I maybe want to listen to the local utilities and stuff, which uses DMR, and public safety uses P25, and there's some other ones that use NextN. So now I know I have to buy a scanner that's capable of multiple digital modes, multiple types of operations, so conventional and trunking, as well as, you know what, if all this is there, I really want to make sure it's easy to use or something. Now, look at, for example, I'll use Uniden. Okay, Uniden makes many different scanner models. Some models are only going to be conventional and trunking, VHF, UHF 800, and P25 only. If I want NextN or if I want DMR, I may have to upgrade to a different scanner, or I might have to select something else, or I can purchase as an upgrade. Point of the matter is that's where you got to kind of sit down and start ticking marks off the, off the checkbox here to go ahead and saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. Now, if it might be too confusing on there, a good example is that they do make the 436 and 536 handheld and base mobiles or mobile radios, however you want to call them. They're handheld or mobile scanners, they sometimes call them. Excuse me. And they also make the SDS 100 and the SDS 200, which are the SDR models and versions of the scanner. Obviously, you're going to be paying more for an SDR scanner versus a analog, or not analog, but a non-SDR scanner. Let's call it that way. So that kind of comes into play. Now, hey, how does this feature work? How does this menu system work? How do you do this and this and this? That might be something, hey, get online, read the manual, how you do it. Or find out, this day and age, is there a computer program or software that I can run to help do that? So that's kind of what you have to do. And I know, some people want a cookie cutter stamp kind of thing to saying, hey, I want this and this and this. What do you recommend? What do you recommend? And guess what? Sometimes some of that stuff just does not translate on there. So with that being said, you got to kind of just sit down and do the research. The other thing about it too is if you're looking for a new radio or something and you have a club, you have a resource on it or something like that, go ahead and go out there and look for the reviews, the comments, and suggestions. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Be careful on reviews, okay? I know there are some people that do reviews. They do a bang-up job on reviews, hands down. And there's other people that do reviews that are 100% paid for or jaded in that review. And you could see that, you can tell that, you can watch that, how, and I've seen it, there's some YouTube channels out there. Hey, if you guys do reviews, that's great. That's fine. This is my personal opinion. But actually, reviews also do come down to personal opinions also. There are some reviews that will walk you through the steps on how to do it. Those are good. Go to manufacturer YouTube channels or manufacturer websites and stuff and see if they have tutorials on there. That's going to go ahead and be the best one on there. Reviews are great. Like I said, reviews are fine. Reviews are great. But there's just sometimes that you could just tell by a review it's public opinion or it's jaded or something like that on there. And then it doesn't give you a good review. It gives you more of a review of what that person wants on there. So that's how you can tell what features you want in a device. Next question comes out of an episode that we did, which actually begged and asked the question, which radio service is going to be right for you? Okay. And this is where we examined all the different radio services, MERS, FRS, GMRS, Marine, CB, business, public safety, those kind of things like that, how it can all fit in depending on which service you're allowed to use and which service is going to work right to you. And then what happened is that this question came out of it, which was a really good question because I was like, man, did that video really cover anything of it? And it was, do you have a path or means to help determine what communication type is best for me? And what they mean by this one is that what I kind of talked to a little bit earlier in this video is that there are some services that are licensed by use. So MERS, FRS, CBs, Marine, right? Those are, you buy the radio. By buying the radio that is type specific for it, you agree to use that radio in a lawful manner in accordance with the part of the FCC, actual Title 47, I should say, part of the U.S. code that states you're going to be using this radio of this service in this legal manner. Okay. Overall, for example, all the radio services, you cannot use your radio service in a commission of crime. Okay. Hands down, you can't do that. But then there's certain other restrictions, limitations. Marine can only really be used on waterways or interactions between land operations and ship operations. So once again, not going to go into that episode. Go ahead and look it up on the channel here. But with that being said, this question kind of came back, and I actually responded back to the question. It says, I think, excuse me, I think I know what you mean, but could you define your question a little bit more? And they replied back and they said, yeah, you talk, and kind of like I said, you talk about FRS, you talk about MERS, you talk about this and this. How do I know what's going to work for me? And that's a really good point, because what happens is that if you think you need a certain type of radio service or something, you could easily get up to spending a lot of money up here, okay, for something that you either could do no cost or extremely low cost. And a good case in point is that a lot of people think that I always need a repeater. I have a lot of business customers that I've heard people say, oh, I need a repeater and da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, well, why do you need a repeater? Well, a repeater is going to give me range and this, and this is what the other radio companies said and da-da-da-da-da. Okay. Sometimes, believe it or not, radio companies will do things just to sell you, make money, to sell you things that you may not necessarily need. So not a lot of things come into doing things as into getting up and running. Now, I'm going to give a case in point example. I was just obviously over the weekend and stuff like that, where we had some doctor's appointments we had to go to and other things like that. I bring my trusty scanner along with me. Okay. I like to listen in the car. I have a handheld scanner. Don't have a mobile scanner. That way I can take it wherever. If I need to, I can put the external antenna up on the roof. And as I was listening, I was scanning. And as we got near some shopping centers and malls and all those kind of things like that, what blew up in usage? Does anybody want to take a guess? Guess what? FRS channels. Because a lot of businesses use FRS radios, or they use the UHF business radios for that purpose. So I'm hearing all this traffic and everything like that on there. And then thinking for the show and stuff, this is a good case example. Are you in an area that uses a lot of FRS? Well, maybe that's not the best radio service for you, but it's a radio service for you to try. MERS is a free radio service for you to try. Alrighty. CB is going FM. It's going to be interesting what's going to happen with CB radio. Maybe they might get down to small little communicators. Who knows? But once again, what is the best path or where? It really is, once again, going to be sitting down and determining where you need to communicate or how you need to communicate. So if you have a warehouse, let's say you have a giant warehouse and stuff like that, if you're going to be talking within the warehouse, you might be able to use FRS. You might be able to use the MERS frequencies. You might be able to use those low power UHF or low power VHF radios on there. Do you need a repeater? No. Do you need to buy expensive radios for it? No. But it may come and it may find out that, hey, radio to radio, these little radios do not work that well. So in that case, you may need to buy higher power radios. You may need to do that. But, and I know money's tough and tight, do you go out and do you buy a thousands of dollar repeater and, $400 or $500 radios, and it's per radio, by the way, that allow you to talk on those repeaters and stuff like that? No, you may not need it. You may also have a situation where you learn to adapt to use the radios. So going back to it, maybe you can use FRS or these low power business radios in your warehouse. But if someone's outside, you may have to go to the other end of the warehouse, or you may have to go to near a window or something to be able to talk to the person outside. Does that come down to ease of convenience? Does that come down to, hey, I'd rather put some money onto it and then be able to have more coverage? Once again, that's totally up to you. But don't be afraid to start small, because once again, you'd be actually surprised at how far this stuff goes. I've done communication tests with MERS. I like VHF hands down. UHF is very nice too, but I have UHF in certain other little categories in my mind that like to do it. I've done a comparison with radios, and then I've seen actually other YouTube friends of mine. So the Smoking Ape, he did a great review on some MERS radios on there. Guess what? That can do it. I've had other friends on there and stuff that have talked about MERS radios or UHF radios or stuff that you can do with your radios on there that will extend the range. So don't be afraid to start small. Don't be afraid to start controlled and expand from there. Now, I will tell you this. A lot of people say, well, when I'm experimenting or I'm getting up to the speed or level on radios, I got to be really careful. I don't want to spend a lot of money. Okay, once again, hey, fully understand that. But most radios that you can purchase for VHF and UHF usage that are programmable can go down usually onto these frequencies like MERS and GMR's frequencies or UHF business frequencies, and their power levels can be adjusted. So if you think you may need to do it, don't be afraid to buy into these radios. Now, one other thing that usually comes up and I see a lot on there is brand name or marketing. Don't fall into that trap, okay? Some radios, you don't need to buy Motorola's and Kenwoods and high-tier radios and stuff like that on there. There are other radio manufacturing stuff. For example, Maxon. They make good, high-quality radios. There was at one time, I believe, RCA made radios. So do your shopping and do your research on there, okay? A lot of people think that I need a brand name radio. I need something that, if the police officers are carrying it, I'm going to be able to use it for my business. Yeah, that's true. Don't get me wrong. That is true. But on the flip side of the coin is you're going to be paying the same prices that police officers and business users and stuff, high tier value for the radios. So if you do need to start out, I always suggest starting out small. Better yet, before you even make a purchase, if you have a good radio company that wants to work with you, call them and ask them and saying, hey, do you have some demos? Or here's what I'm trying to do. Come on out here and cover it. And don't be afraid to weed through the salesman stuff on there. Go ahead and say, yeah, demo these radios. Now, why would I go with this radio over this radio? As I said, in my many, many years of radios, business, and services, I've seen people come in and salesmen come in and that have been shiny suits and everything like this and shiny radios and the beep and the boop and the this and this and this and this and have multiple channels and everything, where all they really need is a simple 16-channel radio. Or not even that. They just need 2 or 3 channels, but they're being told that they have to go and get 16 or multiple channels on there. So just keep that in the thought of your mind, and I hope this kind of answers that question for you. Now, the final question of part 1 here is, does an in-between solution exist for a mobile and a portable? We did an episode where we talked about what should your first radio be. Should your first radio purchase be a mobile radio, or should your first radio purchase be a handheld radio? And this actually did get some good conversations going on. This is one of the episodes where I had a guest on as N9VAO Wally. And we did kind of talk a little bit about amateur, but we also did kind of cover all the bases on there. And this kind of interesting enough because it segues from the last question on there as to what I need to do. But it does raise a good point, because handheld radios are limited to power output usage. Sometimes they're 1 watt, 2 watt, 4 watt, 5 watt, whatever, low power. Are they going to get you far on a radio-to-radio range? No, not really. Not as much as a mobile radio, which might be 25 watts or 50 watts, or they even make some 100-watt radios out there, are going to get you a lot further on there. However, there's more requirements, obviously, with a mobile radio, meaning, hey, you plug in a mobile radio, you have to have a power source, you have to have an antenna source, it has to be fixed-based, it has to be mounted, these kind of things like that. Where obviously a handheld radio, you just have the battery and the antenna, you could take it wherever they're with you. But someone said, was there any way I can bump up my power? Or is there any, once again, in between a mobile and a handheld? And the answer is yes, there are actually solutions that are out there. They're usually called portable amplifiers, or sometimes they're called converticoms, or sometimes they're called mobile boosters. There's a lot of different names for those kind of devices on there. Now, some of these devices are varied based upon radio manufacturer and type of radio that there are. So meaning that, hey, a manufacturer might make a device that can turn your portable into a handheld, but it's only going to be for a certain model handheld. There are other devices out there that allow you to connect the antenna connector right from your handheld radio, and maybe even your speaker mic connection, and plug it into this device, and then this device will amplify it up to maybe say 25 watts or 30 watts or maybe even 50 watts, and it will give you even a handheld and a speaker, like a handheld device and speaker. So you're going to change the channel and everything on the radio that you currently have, but when you want to talk, you use the microphone and it boosts up your power. There's a wide variety of them. And I've seen everything from the B-Tech model that is out there that does VHF and UHF. I've seen models that are out there that do analog only or digital. I've seen multiple different things on there. So what you really need to do is you really kind of need, unfortunately, to do some research. And if you look for, once again, a HT amplifier, sometimes they're called, or a converticom, or like I said, a couple different names out there that you're doing that, or email me if you have questions, and we can I can kind of help you from that point there. But they do exist, and sometimes they're really nice. For a while there, I knew some police departments that actually had, they didn't have mobile radios whatsoever. They had these quote-unquote converticom devices. And when the officer got out, they went and took their radio out, slid it into this device. And Motorola was notorious for these kind of things like that on there. And then what it did is it took and it had, basically the thing slid in there. You could see the display of your radio. You could change the channel on your radio, but you would use a microphone to talk into your radio. Then sort of like a weird kind of speaker microphone almost. Or sometimes it wasn't even a speaker microphone, just a microphone like normally mobile. But then what would happen is the antenna was also connected to it. So that cable came off that converticom, went into an amplifier, and then that amplifier then went along and connected to an external antenna, and then it boosted the signal up. Those are a lot. I've seen a lot of them actually happen on the UHF and 800 megahertz bands. There were a few for VHF, but not that many on there. But I could be wrong. So, but if you do have questions on there, don't be afraid to email me. I gave my email address. I'll give it here towards the end of the show there. So that kind of is part one here. Now we get to that new part of the show here where, what really bends my antenna? What really bends my antenna is I did a show on this called What is Your Hamitude? And when I kind of talked about what is your hamitude or radio attitude also, I went along and I took a look and kind of wanted to dive into the aspects of we all started from a certain spot or location. None of us, and I mean none of us, were born into this world with the knowledge and everything that we needed to about radios. I don't care what radio service you're talking about. I don't care if you're talking about amateur. I don't care if you're talking about marine or you're talking about CB or FRS, GMRS or business or whatever. It comes through the continued process of education, and it comes through the continual process of learning and wanting to strive for more knowledge. No one is above a communication standard. Are there people out there that are very, very gifted and in the process of communications and knowledge about two-way radio products and services and everything? Yes, hands down are there. But guess what? Everybody at one time started out as being no knowledge of the radio service. Many have started out, just like myself, where we decided to tinker and experiment. I can remember going ahead and trying to see about modifying CB radios. I remember Radio Shack used to go ahead and put out a catalog. They used to go ahead and allow you to find out what radios you had and would go ahead and show pictures and documentation on how to modify that radio for specific purposes, whether to increase the power or whether to go ahead and change frequencies or modify it for frequency receive and transmission. Obviously, those manuals stopped many years ago. And in addition, Radio Shack is now, for the most part, defunct as to what the Radio Shack was when they sold those manuals. The biggest thing that anybody can go ahead and do in the radio business and the radio service, which is one of the reasons why I started this channel, was to say, how can I help you? How can my knowledge be passed on to you? Now, I use a statement that I heard one time on there, is that I cannot deposit my life experiences into another one's personal life account, which makes sense. What have I experienced? What my knowledge has is for me and for my experience and my knowledge. I can go ahead and give you that knowledge by explaining it to you, but how much you retain, the ability for you to be able to take that knowledge is going to be 100% solely up to you. You may not be able to retain that knowledge as I have. You may understand that knowledge more than I do, or numerous different other situations from that point. But the way that we can progress, the way that we can go ahead and continue to advance the radio usage world or radio hobby is by going ahead and sharing our knowledge and working together with one another. This is also going to come down to attitudes and the ability or that theory of he who has the most knowledge has the most power. I think back when I start to go ahead and help people in the radio world of when I started to get into the radio world. Along the way, I have had many great mentors and great Elmers and great people that have helped me. The exchange of knowledge and the exchange of information and stuff that I've been able to use and progress with in the future has been great and amazing. However, there are also other people that come down to they think that he who has the most knowledge has the most power. That actually can sometimes do more harm than good. I think back to when I was in law enforcement and I went along and was working at a dispatch center. Before we moved to our new nice dispatch center, we were in the basement of the sheriff's department. And there we had a copier room that was behind a closed door. When I'd opened up the copy room for the first time to make copies, I saw that there was a box on the wall that had glass on there. And inside that box, behind the glass, was a key. Now, I could tell that key was a jail-style key for, obviously sally ports and doors within a jail. Very special, heavy-duty key that you're going to need to get through. And I asked, and I said, what is that key for? What is that purpose of the key? And believe it or not, no one could really go ahead and tell me what it was. There was only one or two people that really could, and they said you'd have to ask them, but good luck for going ahead and finding out what it is. Now, these were people that were either peers to me, which more seniority, or they were supervisors. And I went along and I asked, I said, what is that key? Now, a few of them said you don't need to worry about that key. The time when you need to use that key will be the time that you find out what that key is for. And I said, wouldn't it be good that I know what that key is for or what the quote unquote situation is going to be that I'm going to need to know the key? And they said, nope, you don't need to worry about it. Finally, it came to the point where guess what? We didn't need to know the key, but we were thrusted into an employee situation where we didn't have a lot of staff at a point in time, and we were working hard to hire new staff. But there were times that we wouldn't be having a dispatcher in charge. And that's when I soon pushed the issue again. What is that key for? Well, guess what the key was for? The key was for if there was ever a situation in the jail, power failure, or something got taken over in the jail, such as like inmates' riot or something, and they needed to get access. It was an all-access key. Because our dispatch center was secured and not used by the same keys to get in there, and we can control the control of it, we now had the ability to let people in or out of the dispatch center and would be able to know or have that key in a quote-unquote 24-hour secure location. And guess what? Why was it such a big secret? Because it was the thought of he who has the most knowledge has the most power. When you want to help the radio world or the radio hobby advance, this is going to be a key part of how we can do this. Are we going to basically take and have it as he who has the most knowledge has the most power in the radio world, or are we going to share that knowledge? I can tell you from personal experience, I've been on both lines and I've actually been in the middle. I've been in there, I don't really know if I want them to know the knowledge on there. And maybe I should not have, or maybe I had a valid reason. Flip side of the coin is no, I've been willing to share my knowledge, which I do here, or be able to at least talk and have a conversation, which is that third one, that middle line. We all can have different ideas. We can all exchange different ideas on there. And the best part about it is that sometime when you might be stuck on something and can't figure out something in the radio world, someone may come along that has that one bit of information, that one iota of something that's going to go ahead and make your mind think of saying, you know what? That's what I needed to know, and that's what I needed to figure out. So that's this week's You Know What Really Bends My Antenna. So thank you for tuning in to Listener Mail Part 1. Stay tuned for next week's Listener Mail Part 2. We're going to answer a few more questions and wrap up 2021 here and our first, not full year, but first year of doing Communications and Cigars. So until then, I want to say 73. I want everybody to stay safe. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and if you have a cigar or you're going to get one for Christmas, sit back and enjoy it. Until the next episode, we'll see you later.